Welcome to the Ascent Podcast, a show about inspiring people who explain their path to achievement. I'm your host, Joe Burgess, Wealth Advisor at Mucci Wealth Management. Today on the show, we chat with restaurant owner and entrepreneur Tim Niver. We talk about his roots growing up in Jamestown, New York, which is in the western part of the state. We'll learn about his amazing experiences around food while traveling in Europe, and the process and passion it takes to run restaurants, particularly in a post-pandemic era. And oh yeah, he started a frozen foods business about 5 years ago. And now, here's my interview with Tim. So, Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
You know, the last couple of years, we have less people in studio than we've had in studio, so I always love it when you're in studio. So
yeah,
it's great
it feels
that you're
good.
here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you have a couple of restaurants in St. Paul, and we want to talk about your history, but you're not a Minnesota native. How did you end up here?
I married across and up, as I say. I met my partner in Colorado, kind of serving out there, working at the base of Beaver Creek, and we just kind of happened upon each other. So she left me there. I stayed for another season, and then I realized I needed to do something. So I followed her here, and that's how I ended here. But I'm from Western New York, mostly, all of my life.
Kind of Buffalo area?
Yeah,
then?
just south, Jamestown, New York. I'm a Bills fan. You know, it comes with its own luggage.
Well, Bills fan, just like Minnesota, never won a Super Bowl,
we're
right?
Carrying a similar bag.
Right,
Yeah.
been there forever. So I'm curious always for people that come to Minnesota from a different state, because I don't know how Western New York is, but in Minnesota, people are rooted. And so it's often generations of families. So, for example, I've lived here most of my life outside of a couple of years. You could name a town in Minnesota, and I'd say, well, do you know that family? Right? Because you've just known that.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've heard that it's tougher for people to kind of break in and get connected. What was your experience when you came to Minnesota?
Well, you know, I didn't really stumble over anything particular here. I think I've learned a little bit more about when I got here. I think it took me a minute to understand what was going on and how folks are. And I mean that because Minnesotans are away. Western New York, for example, we had a ton of Italian and Polish immigrant families, also very rooted. But because of their culture, right, they're kind of loud, party, boisterous. They make sausages. You know, it's it's like that. And here, people are very nice, very, very nice. But you don't necessarily get in as easily with folks. Being from New York and having a little bit of that, Western New York, and having a little bit of that swagger, that Polish, Italian, hey, how you doing kind of thing. I am sometimes too nice for people here. It's a little overwhelming for them. So the pleasantries are cool, but I think the thing is like, I want to hug you. I want, I want to I'm a dude, but, I put my arm around another guy, and that's no problem for me. I'm embracing, life. Yeah. It was more about Minnesota accepting me than me accepting Minnesota.
I think we have that more Dutch German background where we're not hugging as much, right?
I think overall that kind of Nordic cool weather scenario is true with the people just a little bit too. It takes a minute to get inside and warm up with people. Yeah.
So how do you find yourself into the restaurant business? Do you have training as a chef? Is this something you always wanted to do, or how did?
If I had trained as a chef, I'd be famous now.
Aren't you famous already?
No, it just so happened that I started at McDonald's when I was a kid, and then my sister got involved in the industry as well, and she's older than I, and so she kind of brought me on as her busboy. And as the business goes, I've been making tips since I was 18 years old, so I would say, that was always a little bit of a motivator, the cash in hand. And so that just kind of led me, I did end up graduating college and thought I was going to get into international business of some sort. And in a way I did. I got to see the world through food. So that's all kind of a development that just happened because I started serving. It was like a teaching job. You can go anywhere with it. And so you can drop your bags and get a job and make enough money to have a life. So that's how it started. And then I realized I knew enough that I was telling people I'd be their best server and this and that when I was interviewing, and then I got a job, and 2 weeks later, somebody saw something in me and they said, "Hey, you know what? You should look at management. When are you going to make the step?" And so that just kind of progressed into me making that choice to stop serving and then end up managing. And I'm back to serving, bartending, clearing tables, and all of it in an ownership role. And that's just how it goes in this industry. If you build a small restaurant, you'll probably end up working in it.
Got it. So you said you've seen the world through food. What does that mean?
Well, my mom started me off just by being a great cook, and she invited a lot of people into our home and cooked Italian-based meals for people. So I saw the immigrant Italian food and the joy of food from a very young age. And then, in college, I lived in Spain for almost a year, about 10 months. And I traveled all through Spain and ate very well because I had an aptitude that was given to me by my family for eating, right? And understanding what that was about. So I was able to enjoy good meals, and we have cooking.
What are meals like in Spain? What's the process? I imagine, I have not been there, but my understanding is it's a much longer and drawn out setting, or is that overstated?
No, it's not overstated, but like anywhere, you have your food markets, you have your street food, you have your tapas places that are strictly tapas, basically where you walk in and everything's there before you in a cold case or a warm case, and they're just kind of putting little plates of things together and popping them over the bar to you while you stand there. And there's napkins on the floor, and it's not particularly clean or whatever. It's a pass-through. A lot of that. A lot of small eats and hellos. Though I did travel to Roses, Spain. There was a restaurant there named El Bulli, and the famous chef Ferran Adrià. And I ate there with Marcus Samuelson of Aquavit and the owner, Håkan Swan of Aquavit. And we had a 31-course, 4-hour lunch, but, overlooking the Mediterranean on this veranda.
Wow.
So at every level of dining is available there, and some of the best, most classic flavors, foods, the bounty geographically. Africa's right there, and all of these, the availability. And so Spain, I ate there when I studied there, and then I went back years later as a restaurateur with Håkan and Marcus, and blew my mind. That was an amazing trip. There are very few people in the world who have eaten at that joint. Thousands, but...
So this is like months in advance.
Months in advance. And then...
What was it? Let me, just so I commit it to memory. What was the name of the place?
El Bulli.
How do you spell that?
E-L, and then capital B-U-L-L-I, El Bulli.
Okay.
Ferran Adrià.
Okay. Wow. And when you mentioned this was college, probably when you had the 31 course.
That was actually as the general manager of Aquavit, Minneapolis at the time. But see, I had gone back and seen it in a couple of different ways. I've spent 4 nights in Pamplona drinking cheap sangria out of a bottle and eating, canned tuna and baguettes and cheese and olives too. That's what Spain offers.
Got it. And so
much I haven't seen. Dude, up in Galicia, the northwestern part, that's where a lot of the seafood comes in, the wine region's different, so there's so much more there that I haven't seen.
Right. So in your experience then, when you had an opportunity to start your own restaurant, do you commit all these things to memory? I mean, I think one of the questions I have is, when you have a restaurant, is it just a product of your life experience? Is that the menu? And I don't know if I'm projecting too far. Do you create the menu at your restaurant?
We collaborate.
Okay.
I trust my chefs. They've done such a great job upholding their own standard and mine and pushing it. But there's a lot at stake when you put something on the menu, and it even gets personal. It's easier when you collaborate because you take a lot of people off the hook because we all agree.
Got it. The 2 restaurants currently, right? Mucci's and St. Dinette and St. Paul. What is, the Niver standard, right? If you're going to say, this is my restaurant and this is what we do here, What is that, and how is that similar or different to maybe other restaurants?
People say that Niver restaurants do have a feel to them. And it might be rooted in that New York swagger a little bit, but it's always like we're trying to build your trust, right? This is a transaction where I want you to like it every time. I'm not trying to get over on you. I want it to be the best example of what we can do every time. I'm not trying to get over on you. But there are so many variables to each little table that come in.
Right.
We're just trying to build a confidence with those tables and a trust of feeling that they sense that their needs somehow will be taken care of. But I think it goes maybe first to just the people being themselves there, the employees being themselves, and us not trying to script a conceptual scenario so much as offer, a meal.
Right.
A meal, break bread.
Right.
It's just a sense of trust, I think.
As an outsider, non-restaurateur looking in, is it the food or the service?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Okay, it's a dance, right? Or it's a ballet. And you have the orchestra in the front, kind of hidden with the lights, and they have to be on time every time. And then you have the dancers on stage that move to the exact beat of the music on time every time. So somebody can dance silently, but it's not quite as beautiful. Somebody can play music without dance, and you might be wondering what else, could be on top of this. So it's a dance, it's a ballet, and those two things work in harmony. But if one is, say, substantially different than the other and you're out of balance, it becomes whatever one's lacking's problem. Mm-hmm. And there are nights where it's maybe the back of the house picks up for the front, or on another night, the front of the house picks up for the back. It's a team game, and I'm not trying to sound like Josh Allen of the Bills, like it's a team game.
Right.
It is.
Right. But you can't have 4 turnovers.
You can't. Joe.
Sorry. Too soon. You've had restaurants in the past.
You mean the ones that closed?
Yeah, that's what I'm going at, is that for restaurants that haven't survived, was it a circumstance or anything that you think you could have controlled, or was it out of your control because it was an environment or it was a pandemic? Are there things that you've learned that you said, man, this is what we missed and we could have been better? Or is it just one of those things that sometimes a concept works, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it runs out? It's almost like being like a rock star, right? Like, how long are they going to like my music? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think you nailed it. I think relevancy is really hard. There's an arc to everybody's restaurant. When it's the hottest, when it's the nottest, and it's very rare when people achieve a busy restaurant for a long time. Not to sound negative, but the reality, or sometimes I do say quite often that if you open a restaurant, you're going to close a restaurant. And that's sort of part of the game. We all like to talk about, we don't like to talk about it, but I think the common knowledge is that restaurants are hard and that the profit margin is low. And I think people have known that for a long time. It's just a little bit harder now, like the game has changed. So, I think we're transitioning into there's so many old things and so many new things at the same time that we're trying to reckon.
I've run a couple of marathons, right? But what's the draw? If you go in and you describe and you say margin's low, really hard, most likely going to close this thing down at some point in time, is it kind of like climbing a mountain because it's there? I like the challenge. I'm going to try to do it. What's the draw?
Not to sound weird, but I expected a question like this from you. You deal with numbers.
Oh, yeah, right.
Fact.
Right.
Yeah. And you deal with percentages. Yeah. And your percentages aren't that much better than mine. If mine are 3 and yours are 6.
Yeah.
But there's a certainty, and in some cases, or a balance of certainty and risk that you can kind of control. So it makes sense that anybody that's outside of this business would look into this business from a financial perspective and say, why would you spend your life doing this? In a lot of ways, for not a lot. For me, that answer is changed in the past 10 years, right? I thought I wanted 5 restaurants. I wanted a multi-unit scenario. I wanted multiple partners. And now I'm trying to make sure still that both places survive to the extent that they can. Okay? Mm-hmm. I don't know what I would say to an investor right now to get them to give me their money, because it is a very, very risky scenario. I just happen to be in already.
Yeah.
All right? Yeah. So my circumstances have changed around me. So what do? Mm-hmm. You change your circumstances inside. And that's what we're doing to make more out of our industry. We've undervalued ourselves. We've undervalued food in the process. Perception of restaurants now is that it's maybe an experience, it's too expensive, right? With inflation. Customer counts are still kind of down. And, the industry overall in April of 2023, National Restaurant News or some other source that I don't remember exactly, restaurant sales are back almost to pre-COVID levels. But, we've all added 10, 15, 20% to our prices. So it's just wild to try to recoup even 1-2%. But when you're in already, what are your options? Passion doesn't pay for anything, but having passion and loving what you do and serving people, that's kind of my love language, to be honest. It has been a calling, I would say, of some sort. But, I'm still standing here through all of what's hard. I've enjoyed my life. I'm happy as I've ever been. And I kind of have the least amount of money I've had in a long time, to be real. Mm-hmm. I think it's about time that I look back and just understand what my achievements have been and how cool that has been. Because maybe it's not that financial result that I thought I could achieve with like high risk investments. But the payoff is still there for me, like that desire to serve and the desire to make things that impress people and to help them make a memory. Those things still are things I want to deliver on.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. As you get
not
old,
to be corny.
No,
either,
I was just thinking
Jesus, I get it.
Yeah, no.
Dude's on a treadmill, man.
Right.
Where's, I could have been a doctor.
No,
but
so what I found as I've gotten older is you go from big glorious goals or achievements to simplifying. I spend a lot of my free time. When I was a kid, I played saxophone for 12 years. And the problem with playing saxophone is nobody else wants to hear it, right? So it's a little harder. So I use, my music skill to pick up a guitar. And so now I'll sit home and rather than watching TV, I'll sit and play guitar a whole bunch. Now, I'm not that good at it, but I love it. And there's a whole lot of things I'm not that good at. And I'm not saying that you're not that good at running a restaurant, but they're just things that you love. And so I'm curious if now, like in a given night, if you feel like now maybe you're more present than you were before. And what I mean by that is paying attention to the room and just enjoying the room of those people that are there to eat your food.
Yes. Because my sphere is shrinking. I lost a restaurant just last year, right? My sphere is shrinking. And so other things, if you have 3 lenses and now you have 2, those things probably come back into some sort of focus. So I am on a path of simplification, I would say. And in this moment, I desire a little more focus And, I started a frozen food line to generate revenue on top of the restaurant margins that aren't there, right? So I started a frozen food company on the side, and I see that as the potential big risk move, but also a way for me to feed people, sustain my desire to, present a family meal and make the best one I can.
Right.
So I think I make one of the best frozen lasagnas in the country, hands down. Am I going to be able to get people to know about it? I don't know. But that's so I can have my restaurant in that little nut, and then I've got another side company, and maybe there's a bigger nut with a slightly different upward potential here.
Right.
So, it's not without, simplification's not without some sort of layering. I think it's smart to be diversified, obviously. There's a lot of angles that I wasn't really pursuing while I was pursuing having 5 restaurants.
Yeah.
So, having a podcast of my own and those things, staying in the public eye and being relevant now with where I am now, with what's important to the industry.
Right.
I'm still right in it.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break. You mentioned starting a frozen food business. When we come back, I want to unpack that topic a little bit more with you. Hey there, this is Joe. You know me as the host of this podcast, but did you know that I'm also the co-founder and president of Mucci Wealth Management, a boutique wealth management firm in Minneapolis, Minnesota? My team and I excel at taking complex family and business planning concepts and making our financial advice easy to understand. We recognize the trust that executives and families place in our team and value our role in helping our clients be intentional with their assets. When you partner with Mucci, my team and I focus on creating a plan that encompasses your financial goals and philanthropy, while also understanding how you want your wealth to impact your family and future generations. You can trust our unique expertise to build a thoughtful yet strategic wealth and legacy plan for your future. To learn more about me and my firm, send me an email at joe@moxiewealth.com. That's joe@moxie wealth.com. Securities offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Cetera Investment Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. Mucci Wealth Management offices are at 2701 University Avenue Southeast, Minneapolis, Minnesota, 55414. You kind of nonchalantly say, and I started doing frozen food. Like, seems like a bigger project, but my question behind that, trying to figure out how you get it, just pivot to that, because it seems in a lot of ways entirely different thing. Is that a result of, you had mentioned the restaurant business is hard. I imagine really hard during the pandemic. Are you kind of reading the tea leaves saying, boy, this people going out is becoming less and less. People are, door dashing and not coming into the city and all that kind of stuff. Did that spark your thought on diversification? Like, I might need something different because this might wane.
I had made that decision way before COVID.
Oh, okay.
So I already saw the changes happening in the industry. I didn't know the end results or how they would feel completely, like, say, the city's implementation of minimum wage increases up to $15 an hour. So we can push back at the beginning and say, hey, they're making enough money anyway, but, we want them to, have an established minimum that's greater. But now, honestly, for a small restaurant like mine, it's a $20,000 to $25,000 increase every year. So if I had, 8 years ago said to my business partner, I got $100,000 profit, that's gone just by that minimum wage increase, because there's no tip credit or anything. So, prices started going up, and I started seeing a little bit of the tea leaves, but it was pre-COVID. And I started with pizzas because I thought, well, shoot, everybody loves pizzas.
Right.
So I saw some things coming down the pike, but, they had not been realized. 5 years is a long freaking time ago right now.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So then COVID happened, just if I may expound.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then COVID happened, and I realized we were doing all kinds of takeout stuff and trying to be creative, and people were down, and it was a really hard time. But luckily, we were able to. I had a few moments to dedicate to the frozen, and we got meat lasagna, frozen lasagna developed in stores. And then quickly followed with, 3 other SKUs. So, COVID did allow me to consider what an expansion of those ideas could be. I had a little more time to consider things that way, and I know this is going to, maybe the way I'm going to say this is going to sound weird, but we had a couple of years that were government funded. So, we did our best to stretch that and pay everybody and keep as many people as we were able to online. But without those funds, we'd be gone. So they were vital and well used. And I think part of getting through COVID was examining, any direction that you could to kind of consider just beyond survival. And so I was able to be like, well, shoot, I already have this in motion. Let's just add.
I don't know what the business structure is of the frozen food, but were you able to employ people on that branch of business?
Yeah.
That maybe you had to cut from the restaurant business at the time?
No. I did a lot of the work on my own.
Okay.
We had some consulting stuff going on through the beginning and the launch of the pizzas, and now we have to do less of that because we've done the process enough. And now we have some co-packing partners that have their USDA people on site. We send them a label, we show them the ingredients and give them the idea. And it doesn't take that long to turn it around now. So we feel like we're onto something.
Yeah.
Breaking the distributor part of this is really, really intricate in a dumb way.
Is it like, I have friends that are in the brewery business and somebody buys their distribution rights. Does it work that way in food?
No, I have to convince them I have a product worth selling, and then get a grocery store to tell them they want to sell the product. I kind of muscled my way into some local stores because of my reputation as a restaurateur, and I was able to link up with a distributor. I pay them, 20% to pick up store and redistribute. But it, it's an expensive part of the business, but there's so many products out there. The focus isn't always on yours. They'll drop it off, they'll show it, but it's me and somebody else I'm trying to feed, Joe, so I'm working into a new industry I know nothing about, but I find it very exhilarating. I really do. It's like, and the New York comes out a little bit too in this, and I kind of like it. It's kind of back a little bit. Like the fire is like kindled with this. Like, hey man, I haven't heard from you in 2 months. Like I'll tell you. Like it's been 2 months and 3 days. Right. Why are we not talking? Let's go. And then I'll be like, maybe your boss has time. I don't know. Like let's go. So,
what's the brand so people know?
Mucci's Frozen Foods.
Okay,
it's Mucci's.
Mucci's.
Yeah, we have 4 pizzas and 4 entrees and we're in Kowalski's.
Cool.
Excellent local partner, sharing their beautiful stores, albeit premium type of store. We're a premium product, and not everybody can shop there daily. I do because it's so close to my house, and they've just been an excellent local partner. Lunds and Byerly's, we're in some of those stores. We're in some festivals, about 60 stores right now. We're in co-ops because it's co-op ready.
How long has it been when you started?
About 5 years.
I'm sensing kind of a cool energy of trying to figure out something new. Do you wish you kind of done that earlier, or just kind of didn't have space
been that. It's everything we do is there's just so many variables in our business, like moving pieces.
Yeah.
Like one night people don't come. What do you do when they don't come?
Right.
And then the next night you're overwhelmed because the last night was slow and you had no idea. Nobody told you they were coming, and they all came. Like every single moment is different. Every single person.
Do you advertise?
Barely. We don't have a sign on the building.
It's like a speakeasy. You have to know.
Okay, like I'm, people may like me, they may say nice things about me, but I am slightly quirky, and there are certain things I haven't done, won't do. Maybe it was I couldn't afford the sign at the beginning, and now people are like, "Where's the sign?" I didn't know where you were. I'm like, "You're in my restaurant right now. You find us."
Right.
But so and with the variables changing so much, it doesn't matter how good you are. You can't always meet the variable. You can't always, So maybe back to a place like the strip club Meat and Fish. I call that like a storybook. That restaurant peaked, and it kind of just plateaued, and then it started to soften, and then we had, by the end of the 9th year, like a little bit of a hard time, like figuring out how we would end or continue, and we decided to call it and say, "Yo, we're going to close in 6 months." We gave everybody 6 months notice. And it was such a wonderful, vibey joint that those last 6 months were as good as the first 6 in a crazy way. And you get to write the end, at the end of the story, and close the chapter on something and put it up on a shelf and be like, "Wow, dude, can you believe we got through that?" And people made a little bit of money on the way, and we've employed a lot of people and, helped a lot of lives, I think, too. But wow, that was sweet.
Yeah.
So, the stories are being written right now, and they're very different. They're just very different.
For some reason in my mind, it's like the creative process. If you came up with a new style of food that you wanted to explore, I suppose the easy thing is just to bring that into your current restaurants, or does that sometimes necessitate considering a different restaurant? That, hey, I was just over in Greece and I've just decided there is a Mediterranean food that I want to really focus on for now. Like,
we do what we want.
Yeah.
We do what we want. There's a few basics that don't move off the menu because we have high enough demand for them that we know those are leaders, right? Creatively, as long as it feels a part or adjacent to the concepts from a food standpoint, I want the chefs to feel the ability and openness to create what they feel represents them, as well as the restaurant. We have a pasta right now with some Middle Eastern roots, some baba ganoush. In the filling, it's a cappelletti, little spiced yogurt, little fried garbanzo beans for texture, little sweetness, a little pickle in that dish as well, and a caponata. And that's not Italian. That is somebody coming up with something that is a really beautiful dish that relates and in balance with the other things around it on the menu.
Do you find that AI is going to be useful in either your restaurant business or in the frozen food, anything that you're doing?
I'm not applying it currently in my businesses. I'm playing with it. It can write a menu, not repeating ingredients, 12 courses, So there are certain things you can get from it that maybe a human would toil over for a while.
Sure.
So a non-chef like me, right, I'm a home chef, I can get a lot of insight on some things through AI. So I'm willing to use whatever tool is available to me to be better or to be more creative or to get a different perspective. You don't have to ask it about your perspective.
Do you feel that in any way, this is going to come out wrong probably, but cheapens the food? And what I mean by that is somebody says, hey, I want to write a speech, and I do AI and just say, have the speech do this, this, and this, and it kicks it out. And people are like, well, that's kind of uncool because it wasn't your own thing. If we're talking recipes, how do you feel about that?
It's all based on what's already been done. It's not inventing every new cuisine out there. I don't need it to invent a cuisine for me. I already have one. It can't cook the food for me. It can't give you the sensation of freshness. It doesn't give you aromatic. It just can't complete the job. It can help me enhance what I do, but it can't complete the job.
How do you think the restaurant industry is changing? I mean, I know with the pandemic, there's been higher costs and there's been probably less people going out to eat, that kind of thing. But has it shifted to where, my son who's 14 and he's like, yeah, I'm hungry. I'm just going to order DoorDash. And I'm like, what? We don't go into the cupboard anymore. We just order something to be delivered. We don't, and I didn't let him do it. But the first thought for people is, how do I get it right away? How do I make it as convenient as possible? I have a friend that owns a bunch of McDonald's, and the percentage of their sales from McDonald's that are actually delivered to people's houses. I mean, let alone everybody goes through the drive-thru, right? There's probably 80% of their sales at the drive-thru, but people don't even get up to go out anymore. And do you have to accommodate as a restaurant, or that's just part of the deal? Like,
you answered your own question.
Yeah.
Because I would have spun this probably on you, because I think the thing is when people say, how do I know what's changed? The biggest change are people's habits. So I would say right back to you, okay, pre-COVID, how many nights out a week did you eat?
Probably a couple, if I wasn't at a sporting event or something, right?
All right, so that's another night out, a sporting event. All right, yeah. I see what you're saying. So, and then now, do you find that different?
I find probably mainly not driving downtown.
Okay. Well,
I think that's probably the main
this is exactly what we're hearing. Yeah. This is exactly what we're hearing. This is what the downtowns are hearing. This is what we're seeing in suburban food sales. And, I don't know those sales, but I know, for example, my food rep says, oh, yeah, I'm like, how are the suburbs doing? Really good, really good. So, we do have a little bit of an island here with the cities now. There's an island that keeps a lot more of our guests kind of thinking about convenience versus experience too. And you kind of nailed it. I think it's people's habits have just changed, and they're not going to make those treks, especially if there's perceived, say, violence or other things that could be happening down in the city, which on a percentage basis, as I've seen, maybe are not crazy different than other years that we've experienced. But, these are the challenges that the city faces. And their fees are going up, too. City's charging us more. Taxes are going up. There's a lot of stuff to pay for, man. So, it's kind of a perfect storm if you're living in the cities right now. My advice to myself and to everybody else is to adjust your labor dramatically and kind of whittle back a little bit what your offerings are, so you're just not having to have so much around, and just be a lot smarter and leaner. We can't always offer so much choice to folks. It really just stretches us too thin from a labor perspective, prep. And then you're buying things that aren't selling as often. It really isn't the best way to run a restaurant anyway. So, I have a lot of advice for people right now. It's just hard to kind of control some of these, underlying bigger problems that have developed with, say, the murder of George Floyd, with COVID, with, some really dramatic life events. So this is the detritus. What's left is an interesting amalgamation of things, for sure. And I want you to come back downtown, Joe. That's what I want.
Yeah.
I want you to come back downtown, okay? I want you in your office. I want you to come to my restaurant and everybody else's restaurants downtown, because it's still a value. It's still a value to find verve and add verve and vibe to a city.
Right.
It's important.
Yeah.
You don't want to see that diminished.
Yeah.
I don't think people really do. There's just a lack of confidence right now. So, it took 2 or 3 years to kind of break down where we are now, and I suspect it'll take 2-3 years to either build up or figure out, really where we land.
Well, I think there's going to be a shift, becoming aware or re-aware of community and connection with people. For example, one of the things, even within my office, that we have discussions about is there are certain members of the team that would prefer we were 100% remote all the time.
Oh, yeah.
that we just never came back to the office because we can do it remote. Why don't we do it remote? And I feel like the old guy when I'm like being eyeball to eyeball with somebody and in their space and not a scheduled Zoom meeting, but just an actual conversation that randomly, that's part of like human relationships are is central to happiness. And there's a difference when the human relationship isn't face to face. And I feel like, the fallout of the pandemic is going to be all of these, if not already, depression and drug use and divorces and all of these things that isolation really brought people. And I think it's maybe more younger generations than older generations are unaware of the importance of the community.
Mm-hmm. We serve the community. Our industry is about serving the community, kind of a daily scenario, right? Beyond that, when we invite people inside, there's not a lot left even for me to offer, say, more of the community. And I felt like that, like my time wasn't available for that. I think having a podcast for me, which I did for me and also for my businesses, really helps me kind of extends the sensations that I have as a business owner to other business owners. And when things are hard, there's a tendency to undershare more because you don't want people to see you feeling as though you're not going to make it, that you have self-doubt or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I've made my community effort in a somewhat selfish way by starting Niver Niverland, my podcast.
Yes.
But I think, the guests that I have, really, really speak their truths, and I get to be real with people about stuff. I don't want to be the one that's complaining on it. I never want to be that complainy guy about the industry. Everything's always bad. I'm not a whiner. But there is reality that people don't talk about, and we huddle into our own private world sometimes instead of engaging our community and feeling at least like you're not alone in what's hard. I don't feel like I'm alone, but I've been asking people in.
Right.
I've been asking people
Niver Niverland is your podcast, and it's other restaurateurs. That's who you're
Other restaurateurs, chefs. I had a lead singer from Bad Bad Hats, and she's amazing. Just whoever I feel like I want to talk to. And where it's always in the restaurant, it's part of my marketing plan.
Yeah.
Like it keeps me connected with everybody in the industry. And, people mention it to me a lot. So I know that the words that I say are being heard, whether people want to admit publicly they feel the same or not. I know they're being heard. And I know then that if you can relate on one line or whatever, that you're going to feel one little bit less alone.
Are there restaurant owners that you feel like you're more of a formal mentor with?
No.
Not your.
I don't put myself in that position with people.
Okay.
I don't know what to teach right now either. I have the same questions they have still. And so it's a process of learning on this together. Like there's so many better operators than me out there. But they may not have, like, say, the emotional connection or, it just, everybody's got a really different relationship with their business because they feel like babies. So we protect them like crazy. And I think because of that protective, measure, there's a lot less, say, business-to-business mentorship, maybe companionship, friendship, collaborative efforts.
With the nature of the restaurant business and other things you've done, do you fear failure?
Sure. Yeah. I've achieved failure on numerous occasions. I think failure it's a really bad, ugly word, Joe. Failure. For what? Because I tried so hard?
Right.
For what? Because no matter how good it was, I just couldn't make it go. Failure for helping direct, help giving a direction for a restaurant culture for the entire city. I know I've had my influence, and some of that is because of my failures. It's also because people see me taking risks, and people see others taking risks, and it's exciting. And so no matter what you do, you could always end up in some sort of position where you might have considered it a failure, and it doesn't have to be a restaurant, So I'm good with anything, and have rectified, in my brain that I did what I could when I could, and I don't consider that a failure. I've gotten out of places that have closed abruptly, and, I'm still negotiating some of that, but it's just part of it, and it's not a failure, And negotiating your way out of a deal is also a success. I've negotiated my way out of a deal in a couple of circumstances where I was just like, oh, thank God,
Yeah. I think it's, in a sense, just life. I think a lot of people like to feel that they have control, and we really all have very limited amount of control. But if you didn't try, that's the thing I think when I reflect on that, it's the trying that's, to me, exciting. Yeah. And the outcome is whatever it is. Yeah.
Well, whatever you're going for, it's, things can just happen to you. You can be happy and do nothing to achieve it. But I think in a lot of ways, joy and all the good, rich parts of life are earned. And, some parts of life come to you personally easier than it would come to other people. I'm rich in love. I'm not corny. I am corny. I'm not trying to sound corny, but I got a lot of good around me. I just recently was listening to a podcast where this was about a month ago, but I've been it was Rick Rubin, Def Jam Records, mm-hmm. right? And he talked about the these grand results that we're all trying to achieve, and I referred to this earlier, but it's really nice if you can take a minute, slow down, and look back and understand maybe all the best results have already happened. They've already happened. You've already done a good job here. And if you have an expectation to have another grand result out there, well, that's fine. But do take stock in what you've already achieved, because, those are the things that you're building your next chapters on. You have to give them credit.
Mm-hmm. Well, we always ask everybody on this podcast, how do you then define success? I know it changes over time for people, but what's your current iteration of how you would be successful?
Well, I'm there. I'm already there. I'm doing what I'm doing. I am successful currently in the moment. With all the struggles and challenges, with all the tumult and all the smiles and all the meals, this is what success looks like right here, right now. Literally, that's why I'm happy, I think, because I'm not trying to put more on top of what I'm going to achieve. I'm at it, man. There's not too many people that do what I do, how I do it. So mm-hmm. I'm there and I'm in it right now. This is what it looks like.
Cool. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there.
All right, man.
I appreciate you coming by. Great insight. Had a great conversation.
Same here. Appreciate you.
Yeah. You've been listening to Tim Niver, owner of Mucci's Italian in St. Dinette in St. Paul, Minnesota. You can learn more about the cuisine of his restaurants or make a reservation at muccisitalian.com. That's MUCCIS Italian.com or stdinette.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Ascent Podcast, a show about inspiring people who explain their path to achievement. I'm your host, Joe Burgess, wealth advisor and founding partner of Mucci Wealth Management. You can learn more about me and my firm at moxiewealthmanagement.com. That's MOXIE wealthmanagement.com. Thanks again. We'll see you next time. The views depicted in this material are for information purposes only and are not necessarily those of Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC. They should not be considered specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Neither Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, nor any of its representatives may give legal or tax advice.